What's up, Drew? This is Ben, and I want to talk about Calvinist smear pages for a minute. Now, I'm noticing these more and more. Obviously, as a Calvinist, you get a lot of hate in the comment section. You get a lot of attention. A lot of people talking about you. A lot of people talking about the 5 points. A lot of people talking about Miguel Servetus. We'll get to him in a second. But there's just a lot of really gross, overstated, hyperbolic inaccuracies coming from these Calvinist smear pages. Now, we all know like the big ones, Back to the Fundamentals is one I've covered before in my ACDS video. You go check that out if you haven't seen it. Soteriology 101, right? And the Calvinist smear page typically has a Calvinism fixation to it, right? There's almost like a paranoia about Calvinism and Calvinists in general. And they treat it as if it's some kind of a weird occultic practice on par with something like witchcraft or voodoo. And there's a lot of claims, all 5 points of Calvinism are absolutely unbiblical. There isn't a single shred of truth in Calvinism. Calvinists don't know how to use the Bible. They're always quoting things out of context. Well, John Calvin was this and that, and John Luther and Martin Calvin. And John Calvin killed Miguel Servetus. He directly was the one who lit it on fire. He threw the flame onto the sticks, and he smiled while it was happening, and so on and so on. Of course, none of that is actually true. John Calvin didn't kill Miguel Servetus. That actually comes from a later embellishment, possibly by his opponents at the time, and the story kind of builded and grew and became more grandiose. And John Calvin is some kind of a grim reaper, apparently, in the mind of a lot of people. If you want to know, this is just a note aside, that if you want to actually know the true history of what happened between John Calvin and Miguel Servetus, there's a great channel online, Ryan Reeves. I believe he's a professor of history at, I think, Conwell. I can't remember off the top of my head. Just put in Ryan Reeves and go check out his video on it. It's very interesting. He gives you the context, what's going on. This weird fixation and fascination that Miguel Servetus had with eschatology, and how he really truly had a fixation with John Calvin. It's very bizarre how I don't even know what the word. Fixation is the only word that comes to mind. He had an unhealthy fascination and attachment to John Calvin. Wrote him all the time, sometimes wrote him daily, wanted him to respond to and speak back to every single tract that had ever been created. John Calvin warned him multiple times not to come to Geneva because he wasn't really in charge anymore. The magistrates didn't like John Calvin. There was a lot of tension between them. John Calvin, while he did agree that Miguel Servetus should be killed, he opted for a much less torturous death by beheading. There's obviously the idea of sacralism that is still floating around in Europe, and there is a little bit of a pushback within Protestant churches and countries, and you have nationalism on the rise, and there's just so many historical things going on. But that's the problem with these smear pages. Now, the latest one I've come across is a smear page called Faith on Fire. Now, this gentleman, the first video I saw of his was his attempt to just absolutely throw out these wild ad hominem smear attacks against Justin Peters. Just very bizarre. Justin Peters hates women and is just a bigot and a hateful. It's just a wild video to watch.
So in that regard, he is a false teacher. He is to be avoided other than for entertainment or research. And let's watch one of his lies that are coming up right now. All the problems of the churches today, none of the men, none of the apostate men, none of the liberal men, it's all blamed on women. And so the conclusion is that the only possible way the Christian church today can actually remain on the right path of being godly is if it's only run by men. And yet the facts just don't bear that out. I cannot think of a worse pastor in America than John MacArthur. There is none. What their job is is to siphon off every new believer that evangelists go and convert to Christianity. So that's what they do. They don't do evangelism. He doesn't do evangelism. He preaches to the choir all the time with his conferences going around to different churches that already believe in Calvinism, and he speaks there and reaffirms their views. He reaffirms that everyone outside of Calvinism is a heathen, but I can wager a guess as to where they will go when they come to meet the Lord one day. And I don't think it's very good. I think they're gravely mistaken. I think they've made the worst choice in the world. They are the modern day Pharisees, and we know what Jesus said about the Pharisees. Give me a break. I mean, common sense would tell you this is a false teaching.
And Justin Peters actually responded in the comments and said pretty much what we're all thinking. And he said, I didn't say any of this. You're putting these words into my mouth. Why are you saying all this? I never said it, but that's the hallmark of a Calvinism smear page. They don't really care about context or truth or validity or actually, letting the person speak for themselves. Now, whether or not you agree with Calvinism, that's okay. We can talk about that. But when I look at an Arminian or a provisionist, yes, I can disagree with them. I can say, I don't agree with your theology. I think you're wrong here. I think you're eisegeting the text here. But I don't go to my Arminian friends or brothers and go, there's nothing biblical in Arminian theology at all. No, an Arminian has never said a single thing that's biblical on planet history, or they're all just dumb and stupid. And of course not. We may disagree theologically, but to just launch into these weird, just tyrants where you have to put Calvinism below you. It's almost like they're above you. There's just a real a spirit of arrogance on people like this, where they just are looking down I can't believe these Calvinists are so stupid. There's nothing biblical in their whole system. I mean, hundreds of years of thought and ideas and theology and thinking and writing and preaching has gone into this theological framework, but not a single scintilla of it is worth anything. It's just all just wild speculation. Such an arrogant attitude, really. Just truly an arrogant attitude. And it's usually by people who are not qualified in terms of their training, in terms of their knowledge, their ability to exegete the text correctly. And I think that's the case with this Faith on Fire gentleman. Now, as I said, I can say that, and then I could just keep saying, well, he's dumb and he's stupid and all that. But if I don't actually make videos where I go into the text and history like I have done before and go, well, this is why I think he's wrong, then I would just be smearing him as well, which is what he did to Justin Peters. Now, I did make a video about this gentleman before, and I'm talking broadly about Calvinism smear pages, but this gentleman just recently made a video the other day called Calvinism Debunked, and it was 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Can you believe it? The entire system of Reformed theology debunked in 3 minutes and 40 seconds.
There's a lot of problems with the 5 points of Calvinism. Not one of them is biblically correct.
Somebody called Guinness, it's a world record. I don't think that's how that works. You can't debunk it in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And when you have an attitude that's really just as arrogant and the bravado where you're just above Calvinists and they're below you and they're dumb and you're smart and you're way up there and they're way down there, well, a couple things happen. First off, Calvinists typically don't take you seriously because you just have a really haughty attitude about you. You're being very dismissive of them. You look down on them and you pretend they're not really worth your time. And when you make statements like, well, not a single thing in Calvinism is biblical, and you claim that you're going to address all the 5 points of Calvinism like you did in a previous video, but then you don't, and you make a video called Calvinism Debunked, and it's only 4 minutes, not even 4 minutes long, people don't really tend to take you seriously. So, like I said, for the Calvinism smear pages out there, we're open to dialogue and debate. We do it all the time. We typically dialogue and debate from the scriptures we exegete in. We can talk about history. We can talk about our beliefs. We can talk about your beliefs or biblical translations or textual criticism or the history of Calvinism and Arminianism and where our beliefs come from and where your beliefs come from and so on and so on. But just making videos where you mock Calvinism and then you put 1 or 2 verses up and go, ha, Calvinism debunked? Yeah, no, that's not enough. Sorry. That's not proof. That's just you mocking people that you don't agree with, which is not a very good tactic if you're someone who's claiming to be a Christian and is trying to bring a certain group of people out of what you would consider a false ideology into your true ideology. Yeah, let's make fun of them. That's a real good way to witness to folks. All right, folks, I hope this has helped. If you like what you saw here, you can click the like button. If you didn't, you can hit the dislike button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you on the next video.